Today is Wednesday, and that means it's time for this week's market update. It's also the first Wednesday in December, which means I have November's data ready and right here for you. This intimidating looking graph here is the number of homes closed each month for the last 5 years. We've got Bellingham, no surprise, is our highest volume city running across the top here. And then Linden is in orange, Ferndale is running across here in green, and Belane is our purple number. The number of closed sales you can see is rising and falling annually, and that corresponds to with this chart, which is the number of new listings coming on the market again in each month for the last 5 years. We see this every single year. Our troughs are November, December, and January, and then generally we'll see a sharp incline February, March, and April. It'll crest over the course of the summer. In some years, it peaks really strongly in one month over another. And then we see a decline either in the late summer or in some cases later in the fall, like October and November. But that's very normal for this time of year to see an overall decline in market activity, both on the new listing side and then correspondingly on the number of closings. Median sales price. Let's take a look here. This is also the last 5 years. I'm going to change it to a 1-year view. Median sales prices are up significantly in Linden. Because it's a smaller market, any individual month can be pretty up and down in Linden or Ferndale or Belane. It happens to be up this month. In Bellingham, we're seeing a smoother overall rise over the course of this year. And again, up a little bit, not a super significant number from October to November. Days on market for this year. Again, we saw a lot of stuff happening. This is for 2020 is right in here. 2021 is when the market really tightened up, and our medians have remained around a week and then going up slightly. Again, in Linden, there was a pocket of homes that had been on the market a significant time longer, and so the median days on market for Linden was 14. I'm curious to see if that's going to be a one-off situation. Maybe it was a specific neighborhood or some situations that skewed the data for November, or if that's the beginning of a trend. We will find out as time goes on. Now, I've gone over the differences between a hot market cooling off slightly, and does that mean housing prices will drop correspondingly? And just because a market cools off slightly does not necessarily mean that housing prices drop. What it sometimes means is that listing prices are finally catching up to what buyers have been able and willing to pay, and so fewer buyers are then putting in offers because it's a higher priced house now. And so there's less of a flurry on those specific houses, and it feels like, oh boy, the market's cooling off, it's slowing down, and houses are maybe staying on the market a little bit longer. I've gone over this particular spreadsheet in a lot of detail in my October 20 episode, which is this one right here. It's available on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube if you want to check that out and see how this spreadsheet was created. But here is where I'm tracking gaps in the market between the original list price that a house is first listed at and the sales price that it finally closes at. That gap tells us something about the heat of the market, because if houses are selling for under list price, selling for over list price, it gives us an indication as to buyer fatigue, buyer interest. But we also need to know what the original list prices are, and that is telling us then if housing prices are actually dropping or the gap is just diminishing. So the market's cooling off without housing prices dropping. So the red line here are closed sales prices. This is just for Bellingham in this situation. These are median closed prices each month of the last 2 years. The blue line is the median original list price. And so it was back in the spring, no surprise there, that we saw a significant gap, even up to between 4 and 8% gap of houses selling for 4 to 8% over their original list price. That's what's illustrated by this gap right here. But you'll notice listing prices, original list prices, started to catch up. And then we started seeing a market cooling. Some houses sitting a little longer that we thought would have sold right away earlier this year, and maybe not as many offers. And there's a couple of things to consider there too is potentially with work from home trends. We've had a huge buyer pool moving into this area from surrounding counties and regions. Potentially, we have worked through that buyer pool and we might see a little bit more of a stasis and a little bit more balance brought back to the market with not such a crush of new buyers coming into the area. That is one potential demographic change that we might be seeing having an influence here, where they were buying so much in here caused a lot of these price increases, and we might see that tapering off, albeit somewhat slightly. What I found very, very interesting here is looking at how the list prices continued to go up and up, and then they dropped. They dropped by, I mean, that difference is roughly $22,000, 20-ish thousand dollars between the list price dropping from October's median list price to November's median list price, and then close prices continue to rise. So that gap that we ended up with in November is a 6.3% gap, which we haven't seen since July and truly closer to April of this last year. It was 5% in July and then 8.8% in May of this year. So that means a buyer frenzy, if you will, buyers offering significantly over list price to a statistically significant amount as list prices then taper off slightly. So the market is shifting in micro amounts constantly. And I'm very, very curious to see if this November gap is a one off situation or if this is an indicator of a bigger trend as we run into the slower listing months that should have a slower buying pool, a lower buying pool. But last year is when we saw an incredibly tight inventory over the winter months, because even though there were fewer buyers theoretically and there were fewer listings for sure, there was still a disproportionate amount of buyers for the number of listings available. And so this is a market update as to what happened, but also a big question mark as we look into December and January's data. But as always, you know I will be here to tell you things as soon as I know them with each week's market update. So that was this week's market update. Have a great day.